Well, good morning, everyone. Good morning and good afternoon, and lovely to see you all. Thank you so much for giving me your time. I really appreciate it. Today will be a little bit different. Today, I want to tell you a story. And it's a story about a very, very special man. You can look him up on Google. You can look him up on YouTube. He is a remarkable man. And he had a very positive effect on my life over the years. I came across this man, or rather, I came across his story when I was about 27, 28, something like that. And I thought he was just incredible. And as my life, as I, went through the years, when I had very difficult times, I would always think back to this man. And he helped to get me through difficult periods in my life. So we call him, or he is called worldwide, the Miracle Man. And it's a story of a man who overcame the most incredible challenges. And I mean incredible. He had an accident, and the accident was so severe. Everyone expected him to die literally within hours. And in a moment, I'll tell you the severity of his injuries. But before I do that, I want to go back and I want to tell you this is a true story of extreme human adversity. Now, Morris Goodman was actually a very successful businessman whose life changed in seconds. He went from being well off, wealthy, successful to nothing in seconds. Sudden and complete devastation. But before we go into it, I want to talk to you a little bit about who he was before his life-changing event. So he was American, a very ambitious young man. He went into the insurance industry, and I resonated with that because when I left the Royal Marines, I also went into the insurance industry. And he, through his personal leadership, ambition, discipline, he built. He was very goal-oriented, and he had a passion. His hobby was aviation, flying. And he bought his own small private plane. And that's what he used to do in his days off, in his time off. He loved to fly. Now, on this slide, I've written a quote from him at the bottom in red. I refused to accept the word impossible. And I thought, what a wonderful statement that is. What an absolute wonderful statement. You see, here's a point. He had a terrible accident. He nearly died. Everyone thought he would die. He would never recover. But his recovery did not begin in hospital. It began years earlier in how he trained his mind and how he trained his thinking and how he built his character. Big lesson here. We must never wait for something horrible to happen so that we can rise to the occasion. We should be building our strength, our discipline, our character, our patience, our perseverance on an ongoing basis. So he had a certain set of values, a certain mindset. He was actually piloting a small aircraft when it lost power. And he didn't just crash. The plane struck power lines. Do you know what I mean by these big electricity power lines? It struck these power lines, burst into flames, and crashed violently. The impact crushed his body. He had no warning, no preparation, and suddenly a catastrophic situation. So, at the bottom of this slide, I've said, your past does not define your limits. That's my quote. Your past does not define your limits. He believed thoughts influence our physical outcomes. And the thing I loved, he challenged all of the medical predictions. Now, this is the problem. You and I, we fall into the trap of believing medical predictions. When we get a diagnosis that is not to our liking, that tells us about something very unpleasant happening to us or with us or in us, what do? Well, 99% of us go along with the doctor. There's a phrase for it. We call it white coat syndrome. If they're wearing a white coat, we believe what they say. And my message to you is, no, you do not have to at all. So when it comes to overcoming adversity, the power of identity is so important. Who do you see yourself as? When you look in the mirror, what do you see? When you think about yourself, what thoughts are going through your mind? Who do you identify with? Very important. Maintaining a consistent self-identity, and it's never too early or late to start building a new personal identity. Remember this, you can build a new personal identity at any time you want. You can start rewriting a completely new story about yourself and for yourself. If you are in a situation where something happens and you need to recover, your recovery is not just based on your physical healing, but more importantly, on the identity that you put on yourself and your vision for the future. Your current identity and your vision for the future. So Morris Goodman's story, my goodness, it teaches us resilience that is applied beyond injury, beyond career setbacks, beyond illness, beyond personal loss. So let's look at what happened. The crisis that changed everything in his life. In 1974, he had a plane crash that shattered his body, but not his will. So let me first of all now read to you, I've made a note here, of his injuries. He had complete spinal severed the cord. So he broke his neck high in the cervical spine. His spinal cord was not only damaged but severed. It resulted in complete paralysis from the neck down. Let me say that again. Completely paralyzed. He was quadriplegic. He had no movement at all in his arms, his legs, his torso. His condition was classified as irreversible. Okay, he had no independent movement. He had no independent breathing. He could not breathe on his own. And they had no expectation of neurological recovery. His diaphragm was completely crushed and paralyzed. So as I said, he could not breathe. They had to put him on a breathing machine. He was placed on a ventilator to stay alive. Without mechanical assistance, he would have suffocated within minutes. This alone, just that one injury, put him in a category of patients with almost zero survival odds. His throat, his vocal cords and larynx were totally crushed. He could not speak. He could not make a single sound. Not only that, he could not eat. He could not swallow. He could not drink anything. Nutrition had to be delivered through a tube in his body artificially. This is interesting. Doctors told him he would never speak again. So, he could not move. He could not sit up. He could not scratch an itch. He could not signal for help. Do you know the only thing in his body that he could move? Only one thing. His eyes. The only thing that he could move were his eyes. But he was fully conscious and he was fully aware all the time, and he was trapped in his own body. I want you to imagine that. Paralyzed, crushed, you can't eat, you can't drink, you can't even breathe, you can't swallow, but you are fully aware, and the only thing you can move are your eyes. He could blink his eyes. Now that condition is psychologically devastating. And apart from everything else, it's bound to lead to severe depression and withdrawal. Doctors told his family he would almost certainly die. And then they said, if by a miracle he lives, he will never walk, he will never speak, he will never breathe on his own, and he will need full-time care for the rest of his life. So that is the extent of his injuries. Unbelievable. So, but I've written here at the bottom in red on the slide, never ever accept someone else's limits on you as your own. And this is a trap we fall into occasionally. Okay. Okay. So let's look. Oh. So what happened? Well, he made a choice. He chose daily to fight for recovery. How did he do that? Well, slowly, bit by bit. He realized that recovery is going to be an ongoing process with repeated effort and repeated attempts to communicate. There's a quote at the bottom of this slide by the famous Viktor Frankl that says, between stimulus and response, there is a choice. Now, we've always heard, it's not what happens to you, it's how you respond. That's another way of putting it. Okay. So there was a turning point. Morris Goodman made a decision. He made a decision, and he talked about this later. He made a decision he would not accept the doctor's verdict. Let me say that again. He made the decision that he did not believe the doctor and he would not accept the doctor's verdict as final. He absolutely refused to surrender his identity and his future. He chose responsibility over helplessness. You know, when circumstances are fixed, something happens to you, what choices still remain? Well, so he started by doing detailed mental rehearsals in his mind. He started to imagine parts of his body moving and visualize. He visualized every day, constantly. He was lying in bed, nothing else to do, right? He communicated with people through his eye blinks. They ended up setting up a routine where one blink would mean yes and two would mean no and that sort of thing. And he started to communicate that way. He then started to visualize every single day. He had very deliberate mental discipline. He talked about it later. He visualized himself walking, speaking, leaving the hospital. He even set a clear deadline in his mind. He repeated affirmations to himself in his mind daily. And he deliberately blocked negative input. There was no magical thinking. It was focused. It was sustained medical training, or mental training rather, under extreme conditions. And then tiny victories. Recovery began with microscopic goals. I mean, he set tiny little goals. Breathing, helping his breathing to become better. A goal of swallowing. He imagined and visualized for days that he would be able to swallow. Imagine that. He imagined being able to move a finger. And he focused on his little finger. And he visualized it. And he said affirmations to himself every day that he could move. And he imagined playing a movie in his mind of moving his little finger. And guess what? One day, he moved his little finger. The doctor said it shouldn't happen because there were no neural pathways. The nerves weren't connected. But he moved his little finger. And he just kept growing. Then he was able to start to swallow a little bit. So tiny little victories, tiny little gains began to build up from eye blinks to whispered words. And I've put at the bottom of this slide, small steps repeated daily create massive change. I cannot describe to you the pain he went through. He was in constant, not pain, agony. Constant agony. And then as he started to recover and he began to receive what you would call physical therapy, it was incredible. It was excruciating. It was exhausting. And progress was not linear. He would make a bit of progress and then bang, lose it all again. Then he would make a bit of progress and lose it all again. But he kept reinforcing his mindset, the message. Action created results. Action creates results. Also acknowledge the roles of people around you. His family were a massive support to him. And in life, you and I, when things go wrong, we need support. We can't become a hermit. We can't just lock ourselves away and say, you know, I'll deal with it myself. Maybe you can, but mostly, most of us, we need help, we need support, we need a system around us that we can plug into when things get tough. So he was lucky he didn't have much of a family, but a very small family. And then the medical staff around him were just, I mean, they literally could not believe what they were seeing. They could not believe that this man who should be dead, who should be paralyzed for the rest of his life, was suddenly starting to swallow on his own. Then he could make little noises, little sounds, which eventually turned into a word, a single word. Then he was able to say two words, a second word. He moved his little finger, then another finger, then he moved his hand. They could not believe that this was happening. So the medical staff started to come and be positive in their support of him. And that was very important. Daily discipline and painful progress go hand in hand. And then I've written at the bottom one of the definitions of discipline. I'd like you to remember this. And by the way, if you want to have these slides, I can send them all to you. You just email me and I'll send them. Discipline. Discipline is choosing between what you want now and what you want most. Good example. Imagine you're lying in bed. It's early in the morning, 5 a.m. maybe. You're all cozy, you're warm, and it feels really good. And you don't want to get out of bed. but you also want to be fit and healthy. Maybe you want to run a marathon or you want to get healthy in the gym. So you know you should get up and go training. So what do you do? Well, what do you want now and what do you want most? Which is more important to you? This is where discipline comes in. You know, so I'll go back to acknowledging the role of others, his family, the medical staff, and he had a very strong spiritual faith, by the way, very strong. He was he believed in God. He believed that with God's help, he could do almost anything. Um, and his sister played, she was the major member of his family. She played a critical role in his communication, helping him to set up a communication system using his eyes, using blinking. Yeah. So he overcame all the medical predictions through relentless effort. And here's the word: belief. Effort and belief. He expanded possibility. This one here, expectations. Our expectations shape our behavior. And this again is a problem with white coat syndrome. When we get diagnosed with something, illness, by the medical profession, most of us will go into acceptance mode. Morris took the opposite course of action. So we must be very careful. What do we accept in our life as being true? And positive beliefs will encourage effort and growth far more than negative ones. I remember many years ago, I was listening to a talk by Zig Ziglar. Don't know if anyone has heard of Zig Ziglar. And he said something that impressed me. And he always played with words. He said, you know, in life, you can achieve anything you want with a positive mental attitude. And then he paused. And he said, let me say that again. In life, you can achieve anything you want with a positive mental attitude better than with a negative mental attitude. So he's not saying you can achieve everything with a positive mental attitude, but much better than negative. So we need to try and build within us constantly a positive outlook on things. Okay. Within months, Morris Goodman walked out of the hospital on his own. No crutches, no wheelchair. He walked. I mean, that in itself is almost unbelievable. He then went on to write a book about it. He became a very well-known motivational speaker. He used to appear on stage in front of tens of thousands of people, talking about belief, achieving, beating the impossible. Okay, but you know, so walking out of the hospital was not the end. It was the beginning of a whole new life for him. He became a best-selling author, an international speaker. He was later featured in a movie by Rhonda Bryan called The Secret. Don't know if any of you have ever seen the DVD or CD or movie The Secret. He was in there. He rebuilt his career. He rebuilt his relationships. He rebuilt his purpose in life. And his life after the accident was not smaller. It was larger and more meaningful. He achieved even more. So, you know, I guess the message I'm trying to get across to everyone is no matter what is happening to you in life, no matter what is happening, with responsibility, there is hope. The lesson is not that you can heal everything. It is that beliefs, attitude, and sustained action radically influence your outcomes. So I'd like you all, when we finish this today, I'd like you all to spend one moment and think about one limitation in your life that you have actually accepted without challenging it. Think of one limitation that you have knowingly or unknowingly, consciously or unconsciously accepted without challenging it. And then ask yourself, how does this serve me? Good coaching question. How does this serve me? And the final quote at the bottom of this slide by Morris himself, ask not what is possible, ask what is required. So I wanted to share that story with you all because it impressed me hugely when I read it. And in fact, the first thing, it wasn't a book, it was an audio cassette, if any of you ever remember those. It was an audio cassette I bought about him and listened to, and then I bought a book, and then I started to follow him. You can actually find him on YouTube. You can find his materials online. But as I then, years later, went through ups and downs, I would always think back, my goodness, what I'm experiencing is nothing like what Morris experienced. And if he can beat all of that, I can overcome this. So thank you for your time, ladies and gentlemen. Really appreciate it. Hope you found that either useful or interesting. Vali, you could unmute if you wanted, people. If does anyone have any particular questions or thoughts, feelings, feedback? No? Okay. Let me check the chat.
Gerard?
Yes.
Okay, one of the questions, so you talk about incremental steps to make big changes. And so, sorry, one of the things that I've been doing is listening to Jim Rohn again.
Oh, he's great.
I know, every morning for weeks. And the whole thing about goal setting. But the bit I liked is that you won't make the changes through motivation. It has to be the discipline and determination. So can you just expand a bit more on that from your viewpoint?
Yeah, so discipline. Okay. Remember I said the quote earlier, discipline, a definition is what do you want now compared to what do you want the most? And it's typified by the word why. In coaching, we say to people, when the why is big enough, the how will become obvious. You don't need to worry about how. How will I become healthy? How will I make a fortune? How will I become successful? You start by focusing on the why. Why is that so important to you? And when the why becomes big, the how starts to reveal itself. The universe will start to provide clues, hints. You'll suddenly start being shown people, places, opportunities that are in vibrational alignment with your major goals. So, but it's about the why. What you need to look deep inside. You know, when you write your goals, we all write goals, and quite often goals are like a shopping list. Oh, I'd like this amount of money. I'd like this house, this car, this. But do you really? You need to go through them all and look at it and say, why? Why do I really want that? How big is my want? And when it becomes crucial, the how will become obvious. So you need to ask yourself, Sonia, what is my why?
Well, you're not to expose me yet. But yeah, great response. But and I liked a bit about sometimes we're always running for the shiny objects. but sometimes you have to step back. So the Jim Rowans, the Zig Ziglars, the Abraham Hicks, all of those set the foundation. The optimistic, the optimistic guy wrote the book. And again, it's about, as you say, the why is big enough, the how will be obvious. So anyway, I'll be tapping you up later.
Indeed. We need to have that coffee on Zoom. The other thing is, these men that Sonia has mentioned and that I've mentioned, Jim Rohn, Brian Tracy, Zig Ziglar, Jim Brown, Anthony Robbins, these are all out there. They've produced books and audios and videos and YouTubes. They are there for all of us to plug into and get that extra little dose, injection of motivation that we sometimes need when we feel a bit lost or we feel a bit down. And we do. We all feel a bit lost at times. We feel a bit lacking in direction. Life has a habit of just coming up and knocking us down when we're not expecting it. It happens all the time. So be aware, your past does not define your future. Your present does not define your future. All right. Listen, thank you all so much, guys and girls. Lovely to see you all. And all being well, I'll see you all next week. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.